do want to introduce myself. My name is David Lopez. I am the Senior Manager for Strategic Alliances for ScreenBeam, and I kind of head up our education initiatives throughout the U.S. and a lot of what we do on the global level as well. But this webinar series is sponsored by ScreenBeam Wireless Displays Solutions. ScreenBeam is the #1 wireless display solution for classrooms, conference rooms, and collaboration around the world. We offer a touchless solution to today's, well, too much touch environment. It's a safer solution for connecting, but more importantly, we offer the teacher or presenter the ability to be untethered from cables and connectors while sharing their lessons, stories, digital content, and more. If you would like more information about how to implement a truly modern classroom space, contact us at screenbeam.com for a free trial device or consultation about reverse engineering the modern classroom or understanding the true cost of a modern classroom. We'd love to be able to talk with you about that. Blue Ribbon Schools is also a big part of what we are doing here today. Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that has been serving schools across the nation since 2001. They are passionate about education and want schools to be the very best for students. The Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence one-of-a-kind assessment survey provides actionable insights that can be used at the starting point for school improvement, as the starting point for school improvement. Their comprehensive approach to helping schools includes professional development and support, best practice sharing, conferences, and networking. They do everything possible to create a path forward for all schools and students. We have some exciting things to share about the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence National Conference this year. So once again, please don't miss that at the end of the session today. And really now on to our speaker, Kerry Gallagher. Kerry Gallagher is an innovative teacher, school administrator, lawyer, TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, education consultant, downhill skier, hiker, mom, and wife. She currently serves as assistant principal for teaching and learning at St. John's Preparatory School in Danvers, Massachusetts, and director of K-12 education at Connect Safely, an internet safety nonprofit in Palo Alto, California. Kerry is co-author of several Connect Safely award-winning guidebooks for parents and teachers on topics that include social media, data privacy, education technology, copyright, and more. She's been recognized as a future-ready instructional coach, ASCD Emerging Leader, Adobe Education Leader, PBS Learning Media Digital Innovator, and EdSurge columnist. Her passions include digital wellness, innovative professional learning, and effective integration of curriculum, pedagogy, and technology. Accolades for her work include awards from the Family Online Safety Institute, MassQ, SmartBrief, and St. Anselm College. She is on social media at KerryHawk02, and her website is kerryhawk02.com. And on a personal note, and Kerry, if you would like to go ahead and start, it looks like you already have started sharing your screen. We will get your camera up, but thank you personally for being able to be with us today. And Kerry has been a trooper, and we had some technical glitches to get these things started, but she's been very patient, and I'm really excited about hearing from her today. So Kerry, without further ado, let me grab your camera here and just give me 1 second. And let's see if I can get this to go. There we go.
All right. Well, thank you, David. I should say the same about you. Thank you for your patience as we work through some things on the back end in our pre-show. But I'm really excited to share some tips with our educators who are here today. I know we have folks who are in classrooms every day doing the work that really makes a difference in what education looks like with our students. I personally had my own class that I taught late morning, and even though I work as an administrator most of the day, I always say those 50 to 60 minutes that I spend with my class are the best part of my day. And today they didn't disappoint, for sure. We had a few laughs, but today I really have 3 key tips that I think will help educators, especially as we're navigating really a massive uptick in the use of education technology by necessity, while balancing new schedules and new types of assignments, and really what comes with the territory, whether you're a classroom teacher, an instructional coach for teachers, whether you work in IT at your school or you're an administrator, all of us are learning how to do our jobs all over again. And I think that these 3 key tips are going to serve anyone in any of those roles, in making it feel like it's a little bit more manageable. So without further ado, I'd love to get started. I wanted to start by acknowledging that in 2019 with my class, these are pictures of my actual students that I'm able to share with you. This is what learning looked like. So yes, we were certainly using technology, and yes, they were using screens and collaborating, but they were able to sit closer than 6 feet, and they didn't have to wear masks, and they were even able to touch each other's iPads if necessary in order to help each other and learn and collaborate. Maybe we would even move to a wall and start putting our ideas together using Post-it notes and, touching the same surfaces without sanitizing. Imagine that, right? But today in 2020, my classroom looks really thoroughly different. So this is a selfie I took of me while teaching my students. You can see their desks are 6 feet apart. They're required to stay at their desks. They each have their own iPad. They're not allowed to touch each other's stuff. And you can see half of my students are attending via our digital conferencing platform, and you can see them on that flat panel at the back of the room. And so it's just a thoroughly different classroom feel experience. So how can we take, those earlier pictures and somehow inject a little bit of that personality and interaction and warmth and collaboration into a classroom that looks like this, where we have to be separate? Or a classroom that looks like this for those of you who are attending, participating today, who are fully remote. How do we inject some of that warmth and that kind of personal human touch when we cannot actually be in touch with each other in the way that we're used to? And so I have 3 tips that I think will help us tackle this question. For many of us, education technology was already moving at warp speed prior to, mid-March 2020. And we were being asked to learn tons of new systems as education continued to progress and innovation move forward. So how can we possibly manage now with that pace increasing and all of the other new schedules and systems that we have to be able to navigate, not just with our jobs, but if you're like me, I have a middle schooler and an elementary schooler at home learning as well. So I'm learning the parent side and the educator side. So to give you a little bit of background into what exactly qualifies me to provide these answers for you. David hinted a little bit at my credentials, but I wanted to share that my role at St. John's Prep in Danvers, Massachusetts the title is Assistant Principal for Teaching and Learning, but my responsibility is to supervise our team of instructional coaches and digital learning specialists. So I supervise the folks who create the tutorials and provide the coaching and professional learning for our teachers on learning all these new systems and teaching under these new circumstances. But also that job it requires me to partner very closely with our managing director of IT to make sure that the systems are working properly, that we've invested in the right programs, and that we're keeping everybody safe and secure while they're using those systems. So that combination of my roles at my school really does qualify me to provide you with some tips that I know work because I know from experience that they work. Additionally, I serve as the director of education for a nonprofit called Connect Safely that's based in California. And we work to advise tech companies on how to provide really high quality solutions for their users that also meet federal guidelines like FERPA and COPPA and SIPA and all of the legal jargon. And I have my law degree, and so I've actually read those and read the privacy policies that go with all the tools and have a sense for how they can be applied safely in your school. And so I have some tips there as well. If throughout this program you have questions for me, you can tweet them at me at KerryHawk02. I will, if we don't tackle them as part of the webinar, I will be certainly replying to you via Twitter afterwards, but feel free to comment or tag me there throughout our program today. So how are we going to manage this new increased pace of ed tech? I have really 3 key tips that I want to share with you today. So the first is my tips around cybersecurity and data privacy. This is not just something that's only for IT folks. This is even for those of you who are here because you're tech tentative, I like to say, or I'm not a computer person is a phrase that you've uttered in the past. I can teach you about cybersecurity in a way that makes you feel more confident and feel like you know how to manage your technology and keep your information safe and keep your students' information safe without being intimidating or overwhelming. So I'll be able to do that for you today. I also want to talk a little bit about strategic screen use. Screen time, as far as I'm concerned, is a debate that's out the window. All of us have increased our screen time by necessity. So let's talk about how we can use our screens strategically so that we're managing our wellness, but also maximizing the learning that our students are experiencing while they're using their screens. And finally, I would like to talk a little bit about professional learning and support, because taking care of our teachers and providing them with the professional learning that they need when they're majorly crunched for time, more than they ever have been before, is probably one of the most important things we can do as coaches and instructional leaders in our school. So let's get started with cybersecurity and privacy. So my first really important lesson for folks who work in schools is to increase consistency with the systems that you use. If you increase the consistency, you will by default increase the security. So the two tools that I think every school absolutely needs to have are an LMS, a learning management system. So that's the system or the platform where teachers provide assignments, where students access the assignments and then turn them in. And there should be one learning management system that all teachers are using across your school, or even better, across your whole district. Because many families have children who are in multiple schools. Like my family, I have a middle schooler and an elementary schooler. So it's helpful that their district has chosen to use the same learning management system across K through 12, so that number one, as a parent, I know how to support my children no matter what if I just learn this one system. But number two, from the security side of things, your IT folks are only supporting or focusing their efforts on really only supporting that one platform as the primary platform, and therefore they're better able to secure it, provide the professional learning for it, and make sure that student data is really contained and safe there. The other tool that's really necessary is a video conference tool for your virtual classes. So choose one. Make sure it's the one that you're going to commit to supporting in terms of security, and then provide your teachers with some best practices for keeping their virtual classes secure. How can they make sure that people who are not intended to be in the class aren't invited to join? How can they make sure that students are set up at home when they're attending from home with a background that they're comfortable with, that doesn't violate their privacy by sharing more than they intend with their classmates? And then beyond those two major tools, your learning management system and your video conference tool, add other tools slowly and carefully. Make sure that you vet them. Make sure that you know that they actually do something that the other two tools don't, so that you don't have redundancy and confusion. And really limit the number of tools that any one student will need to access over the course of their day, because we want them using the part of their brain that's associated with learning new material or skills, and not the part of the brain that's used to just navigate and find things. Because if we overtax the part of the brain that's just trying to figure out directions, then they have less cognitive space left to actually learn and meet their learning goals. So this will help reduce that. By narrowing the number of platforms, it's going to be easier for your IT folks to maintain and secure those platforms, and it's more dependable for your teachers and your learners. Once you have those two tools selected, before you start selecting those third, fourth, fifth, sixth tools, and you're trying to limit it, these are 3 questions that you can ask yourself that will help make sure that the tools that you're choosing are more secure. Number 1, if I start using this tool with my students, will my IT crew be able to help me if something goes wrong? So if something goes wrong, does the IT crew know already that I'm using it? Have they vetted it? Do they have a sense of helping me if something goes awry? Who's going to support me? And are they aware that I'm using it? Number 2, is it compatible with all the devices and operating systems that my students are using? So if I start using this ed tech tool over here, does my LMS know that this ed tech tool exists, and do they have a way to integrate together? And same thing with my video conference tool. Does the video conference program know that this tool exists, and will they integrate together well? And if that integration isn't possible, that ed tech tool probably isn't something you should use, because you need, if these other tools are tools that they're dependent on and this is completely separate, that's going to create confusion, and likely there's going to be data that's not as secure as a result. And my last nuance here is that a lot of these tools are free right now, or they're free for trials. And so teachers click the sign up for free button and they think, sweet, I'm not costing my district any money. They promise that it's going to help me reach learning goals, good to go. And then 30 or 60 days in, you get a paywall that pops up requesting that you pay a fee in order to continue using it. So we want to make sure that whatever tools we start onboarding, that we know we're guaranteed to be able to use them for the long haul, so then we're not asking IT or students or teachers to switch gears. It's important to develop a security protocol. So once you've chosen the tools that you're going to use as a teacher or as a school, make sure that you are developing as a community, what if some kind of breach does happen? What are the behaviors that we expect of our teachers? Because panicking is not a good behavior from the adult who's in the room, whether it's a virtual classroom or an in-person classroom. So here's the 4 steps that I recommend. Number 1, record the breach. So if the breach is in the form of an email, screenshot it. If it's in the form of an unwelcome guest in a video call, write down their username that appears on screen. If possible, capture an image of them. And then record the time and date when it happens so that it can be looked up on the back end by your IT folks. Remove that person or delete that email if possible to remove the threat from your system immediately. Report it to your IT folks right away. Report the screenshot, the recording, the time and date stamp, any information you were able to record. And then once you work through that process with your IT folks of digging into what happened, how it happened, and how to prevent it in the future, have a person who is the go-to for sharing what you learned from that with others. Just because we have a security breach, it doesn't mean it's something that we should be ashamed of or hide, or think that it's going to mean that we're going to lose our jobs or get fired or anything like that. What we want to do is share that information with others so that others don't have that same experience in our organization. It's likely that there will be some kind of security breach that happens over the course of the next year. We're just relying on too many tools all at once and onboarding a lot. And unfortunately, there are bad actors out there. So when it does happen, don't panic, follow this protocol, and then develop a way to share out those best practices in your community to prevent it moving forward as much as possible or mitigate the risk. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to cybersecurity is student data privacy. Essentially, by using all of these technology tools, all of us are creating student data each and every day. So student data is any information that we create about our students when we use technology tools to either learn with our students or communicate about our students with others. And all adults have a legal obligation to protect that data from people who shouldn't have access to it. So what are some examples of student data? I really like this graphic from the Data Quality Campaign because it explains all the different types of data that is produced by schools. So it can be academic information like their enrollment, their grades. It can be data that teachers produce. So if something happens in class and I record an observation about a student, or I give student a participation grade or something like that, that's all data that's being collected. Testing, demographics that schools record because we're required to by law, like age, gender, race, economic status, any of their other activity participation like sports or activities, and any homework or learning apps that students submit to us, all of that is tied to their identity. And it's important for schools to keep that data secure and protected. So your IT folks know this, right? And they do their job. But what does this mean for the classroom teacher in terms of your obligation to protect data? Well, the first thing I would say is use only the platforms that your school knows you're using when it comes to your work with students, so that they can support you if there is a breach, and so that they can actively protect that data. And if you're looking for more information beyond that, I recommend this guide from Connect Safely that I had the opportunity to co-author, called The Educator's Guide to Student Data Privacy. I find that there's a lot of information out there about student data privacy for IT folks and for policymakers, but there isn't a lot out there for classroom teachers, and this is really meant to demystify that. So really that first tip is cybersecurity and data privacy. So know what it is that you can do to help keep your virtual classroom and your students' information safe and secure by really staying connected with your IT folks and using the tools that they recommend, and making sure that you're in contact with them if you have questions about whether it's safe. Okay, tip number 2, strategic screen use. Our screen use has skyrocketed, and that's why I chose this little graphic right here to accompany this. So I wanted to share some tools that I've been using with my students that I know work equally well, whether the students are in the classroom with me or at home. And as you saw from my selfie earlier, my students are both. They're in the classroom and at home on any given day. So one tool that I really like is a tool called Padlet. It allows my students to post their own contributions collaboratively to one space. And as you can see in both of these examples from my class, my students were able to post on the same Padlet together, and we were able to have a class collaborative learning experience. And what you're seeing are posts from students who are both in class with me and at home in the same space. So everybody is contributing in the same way, no matter where they are. And this is a tool that if we have to go full remote at some point because it becomes unsafe for us to be together in school, or if we're all able to return to the classroom together at some point because we know that it's safe for us to do that from a health perspective, we can continue using this tool together. So it's something that works no matter what. I think it's important for us to prioritize learning tools that are going to work no matter what the learning situation is moving forward. By the way, all the tools that I'm sharing with you today are tools that we've vetted for security at my school, that we're using the paid most secure version of. They're one of our very small number of tools that we've selected. These are just my recommendations, but there are lots of other tools out there. You need to choose the ones that work best for you and your school. So this is Padlet. It's like a virtual collaboration space for your students. You can see we have a timeline here and then a brainstorm. So the next one I wanted to share with you is Pear Deck. So Pear Deck is an add-on to Google Slides. So many of us use Google Slides. I'm using that right now for my presentation. That makes the slides interactive, and it allows the students to respond to formative questions or check-ins that I can build right into the slides. I really like to use this to do a little bit of social emotional learning with my students. How about we start with a stress check after they return from a long weekend, right? Are they actually feeling more relaxed because they had that time away from academics and school? Or are they more stressed out because heading into the work week or the school week was not something that they were looking forward to? And I can get a sense for where they're at before I actually launch into my lesson, so that I know if they're ready for me to get going and hit the ground running, or if they need me to kind of soft start. But additionally, you could build with Pear Deck in formative questions. So let's say I had them for homework watch a 10-minute video clip, and the start of the class, I wanted to do some questions to check to see if they learned what I wanted them to out of that video. I could input some question slides here that are asking them content-based questions and really get a sense with a formative assessment about how they're doing. Again, whether they're in the classroom or at home, they can participate by responding to these slides on their personal device in the same way. So whether we go full remote or we're all able to be back in the classroom or we continue on this hybrid path, this is a tool that I know I'm going to be able to continue using with my students. And so it's worth my investment of time to learn how to use it and to teach my students how to use it. And it allows them to be interactive no matter where they're learning from. I also think, and I use this Zoom into classmates metaphor here, but no matter which platform you're using for your video conferencing, whether it's Teams like what we're using here, or Zoom, or Google Meet, or Blue Jeans, or GoToMeeting, or any of the platforms that all of us have become adept with, it's important to use some of that on-screen time to connect interpersonally. This is a screenshot from one of my classes last spring, where to open class for the first 5 or 10 minutes, I asked my students to bring their pet or their stuffed pet if they wanted to. And so you can see we were able to take a picture with all of us with our dogs and gerbils and cats, I think somebody had a ferret and ferrets as well. And what I really like to point out is, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but this boy right here with his dog, he actually couldn't get his dog to sit still. So he took a picture of his dog and made it his virtual background. And that's how he shared his pet. So I really love how they got creative. And it only took 5 or 10 minutes of our class time. And then we did actually learn something and do a lesson. So I'm not saying to take away from the learning time, but they're not able to be together either. And they need one another just as much as they need you to have a positive learning experience. So making some space for that, I think, is a really important use of their screen time. And the last tool I wanted to highlight, also a Microsoft tool, just like Teams, which we're using today, is Flipgrid. And this is a way for our students to, outside of class time, share a little bit of themselves with their classmates, and also be able to slow down and watch videos that their classmates have created, so that, again, they have an opportunity to visit with one another. One of the reasons I wanted to highlight Flipgrid is that even though they use the screen to record the video response in Flipgrid, in this case, my students actually were recording what I had them create a monument out of found objects in their home to Martin Luther King Jr. Based on a lesson that we had done comparing the approaches of Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and a few other civil rights activists. And you can see in some of these photos, one boy, his sculpture was made up of a drawing that he propped up in his backyard. Another boy here, this is his sculpture, which is made out of Legos. This one that was featured on my school's Instagram is made out of paper clips, a microphone, and a couple of other objects that he built. You can see this one is a mural that the boy put on the wall of his own bedroom. And so all of them made some kind of monument to Martin Luther King Jr. They took a video of the monument and then of themselves explaining it. So the actual learning task took them away from their screen and had them exploring their home and their yard to find objects, to put something together, to show their learning, and then they submitted it digitally. I also had my students at one point I had them do what I called a window presentation. So I had them take a piece of paper from home and draw 6 symbols, visual symbols, to represent 6 ideas that we had learned. I told them to tape it to a window. And because it was on a window, it was automatically backlit very nicely. And so we could really see what they had drawn. And I said, have a family member take a video of you explaining each of your 6 symbols and then upload your video. So again, what the actual learning task was a break from their screen, but then they submitted it using a screen. So those are just a couple of ideas on using the screens well, but also building and learning tasks that allow for breaks in their screens. Okay, so you're probably thinking, great, Kerry, cybersecurity, data privacy, check. I think I have a sense of what I can do. All these lesson ideas that you're sharing, these are great, but like, how am I supposed to come up with these? Like, you came up with these creative ideas, but how am I supposed to come up with these? Well, the key to that is my 3rd tip: professional learning and professional support for our colleagues. So how can we make sure that we have the mental energy to come up with these creative ideas? Or if you're an instructional leader, how do you provide the supports and time and space for your teachers so that they're coming up with these great learning experiences for your students? So my advice is that you need to, just like we meet learners where they are, we need to meet our teachers where they are. So I think of teachers in a couple of different categories when it comes to their professional learning needs. Some teachers are self-starters. They, as they are sitting at home, coming up with their lesson ideas, they're the ones who will go out and do research and find, tutorials, and are interested in trying new things on their own. And they like to learn at their own pace, really individually. So for those folks, what I recommend doing is build a really robust library of tutorials that either you find online and curate together, or that you create and customize yourself for your teachers. And what I'm showing here is on our LMS, where just like we ask our teachers to curate the resources for their lessons in a nice, organized way for their students, we also create all the resources for our teachers in a nice, organized way on our LMS. So we're modeling a good use of the LMS for our teachers so that they can experience it as professional learners, and therefore they'll translate, hopefully, that system to what they create for their students in their learning management system. So build that strong library for the folks who are self-starters so that they can access it on demand when they need it. Some teachers are less likely to work on their own time because they find it intimidating or overwhelming and they get lost. And so they feel safer in numbers. So for those folks, it's important to offer some synchronous coaching sessions that people can opt into in groups. So this is a great example of a professional learning webinar that we ran recently for our teachers. And you can see that we have teachers of all shapes and sizes, all ages and experiences, and I can vouch for you that these teachers are from tons and tons of different departments. We're talking English, we're talking Spanish, school counseling is represented there. One of our student life folks is represented there. So they're eager to engage in the learning, but they're more likely to engage in it if you come to them by scheduling something that they can opt into rather than having those on-demand webinars that they can do on their own time. So you want to offer both of those kinds. And then finally, making sure that you provide enough preparation time for your teachers so that the folks who are really hands-on have a chance to tinker while in their classrooms in person with any new technology. So this is a great example of a teacher who's working with a colleague whose elbows you can see in kind of the foreground on the right of that picture. You can see they're working together. One has a mask on. And they're working together, tinkering with this flat panel screen experience because it's, rather than working on their own, it's something they want to do together. They want to tinker. They want to be in person. That in-person element is important to them, but they need the time and space built into their workday to do that. And so as instructional leaders, we want to make sure that we have provided them with that time. My advice for making all three of these models work well at the same time without overtaxing your coaches is to create materials that can be used both on demand and during any live support model. So that library of short video tutorials and screenshot tutorials that I showed you on that earlier slide, make sure that those resources could also be something that could be pulled up during that webinar session on screen to show folks how to walk through something step by step, or that could be pulled up by your tinkerers when they're working together to help guide their tinkering practice. So if you create materials that can do double or triple duty, you're really making sure that everyone's working efficiently and that no matter the learning style of the folks, they are able to access what they need when they need it. Offer support using all three models: in-person tinkering, online webinar in groups, individual at their own pace on demand. And again, just build in lots of preparation and collaboration time wherever possible for your teachers. And so with that, I think I'm through with my 3 tips: cybersecurity and data privacy. So limit your use of your tools, make sure you're in contact with your IT folks about which tools you're using and how you're using them. Smart screen use, including learning activities that are screen breaks for our students, and using tools that will work no matter what educational model we're in person, hybrid, or remote. And then professional learning that really meets teachers where they are and acknowledges and honors their learning styles as they're learning all this new ed tech. So David, I know we surely have some questions from folks.
I hope so. We're going to see what people come in with. I do have a few questions that just while people, if they get a chance to ask, are putting them in. First of all, thank you. That was a lot of great information to be able to share. And I think there's several things that I was thinking of as you were going through. One of the things that I wanted to ask in regards to security is concerned is, I know you mentioned like email interruptions as far as breaches are concerned, like breaches that you've seen at schools or been aware of. Email interruptions, maybe video interruption that happens. Are there any others that school administrators should be looking for or be aware of that are out there that besides email and video that they might be concerned about? Or are those 2 the main ones that you've seen?
So
Happen a
I
lot.
do think, yeah, I do think that those two are the main ones to put on the radars of teachers so that they know how to, those are the ones that teachers will experience the most. So in terms of
Okay.
preparing your teachers for how to respond to those, I would say those two are primary right now. But additionally, I think administrators need to, before encouraging their teachers to adopt a new tool, it's important to collaborate with your IT folks to make sure that that new tool is specifically designed to be used for education and for younger users, not adult users, which makes sure that that company has committed to protecting the data of those younger users based on what is required in laws like the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act and the Children's Internet Privacy Act. Because if we start using tools that were not designed for children with children, we're actually sharing data of our youngest learners in a way that we shouldn't be. It's not intended to be
Yeah.
shared. So that would be my tip for those administrators and leaders, is really make sure you're partnered with your IT folks for data privacy and security before rolling things out with teachers.
Okay. That's a great suggestion, and I think you mentioned a lot of that, and that really is something to make sure there's I often, when I talk with districts about this, I often say, not this particular, but I often say that oftentimes IT and instructional, they maybe shake hands in the hallway, but they don't always hold hands. And so, it's something that they need to be able to hold hands, especially right now in these situations. We did have a question come in. Within today's dual in-person and remote platforms, he says our district's infrastructure is struggling. He's asked if there's any suggestions on ways to use less Wi-Fi while continuing with the technology platform. Is there any ideas or suggestions on that?
So one thing that we've done, so firstly, I think we all feel that pain, and whether it's in our homes, I know one day last week I got a panicked text from one of my daughters because our Wi-Fi went out in the middle of her school day. So I think families are experiencing it at home, and schools are experiencing it as well in terms of infrastructure. One potential option while you're looking into strengthening the infrastructure itself through, your Wi-Fi, your networking contractors, and using E-rate funds and all of those things that I'm sure your IT and infrastructure folks are doing already behind the scenes. But from a teaching and learning perspective, one option that we've provided for our teachers is that during when your normal scheduled class is supposed to happen, if once or twice per week, you do not need the students to actually physically be on the video call with you in order for them to carry out the learning task, you could have them check in at the beginning of the class period, then leave the video conference meeting, do their learning task, and then check in at the end. And that would potentially lighten the load of how much your network is being used at any one given time if teachers are given the option of not necessarily being on camera the whole time with every class. You may want to set some guideline expectations for how often they are on, so that it, parents aren't like, how come my kid's actually never on a call when they're supposed to be, right? So I would say if it's like, once or twice per week per class, then that's okay to still meet expectations, and that may help lighten that load. And certainly there is no reason why students have to be on camera the whole time they're doing any kind of academic work. So really you want to think carefully about, does this require them to be on camera and be a part of the discussion, or is it something they could do on their own and we could kind of end the call to reduce the load on the Wi-Fi?
That's a great suggestion. On the one of the things that you mentioned that I thought was interesting was the free version of tools versus the paid versions. In your experience, I know there are, like you said, a lot of free versions out there, and maybe they're not necessarily even trial versions. Maybe they're free, just for limited use or something like that. Are those possibly less secure than a paid version of a tool when it comes to data privacy? Is that something that you've experienced, or is that just kind of they just turn down the usage so you're not using as much of the tool, and that's what the limitation is?
So if it's a tool that there's a free version, and then there's like, you can pay to get more features. For instance, usually the free version is not less secure. Usually it is just as secure as the rest. But if the tool is free in general, it's usually not very secure, because security costs money, right? Security is expensive. So it is not likely that tools that are completely free are also completely secure. There are some exceptions to that. Flipgrid is an exception to that. Flipgrid is a completely free tool, but it also is owned by Microsoft, which has a lot of tools that are not free. And so the funding comes from different places. So there is no easy answer to that, David. The answer is it depends on the tool, right? And it depends on who controls it, and was it designed specifically for K-12? So if you're not really familiar with privacy policies and the nuances of, what should be the security protocol for a tool that's for kids who are under 18 versus under 13, then again, just chat with your IT folks. They can help you work out those nuances.
Yeah, and that's what you said, is that it's really important to evaluate those things, especially now when so much more has been introduced, to take some time to evaluate it. Because I know, working in the schools, a lot of schools, like you said in the very beginning, they don't necessarily standardize on one thing, and when that happens, in my experience, it's just kind of a wild west sometimes, where you have teachers using different things, and oh yeah, sure, that's fine, go ahead, and whatever works for you. And IT guys start to freak out when that happens, and it can get pretty hairy. So it's so important that people listen to that and stress those ideas around having that hand-holding relationship with your IT department. Another question that came up was, we are spending a lot of time, and you mentioned the screen time, and I think that was really great the way you handled that. But those digital connections, I think you and I talked about this a little bit. Those digital connections versus in-person connections are hard to turn off, and relationships are different, and even some are stronger because we have those online relationships. But do you have any, besides the ones that you mentioned about the students regulating their time? What about for admins and teachers regulating their plugged-in time? I mean, is there something that you feel is important to be able to share with those folks?
Yeah, I would say that I will admit that I am able to give advice, but I don't always take my own advice. So I have to say that when I was working fully remote from mid-March through the end of the school year, it was really hard to shut it off, because I was home and I was working, and so there was no real clear, there was no commute to be the clear divider, right, between my work day and my home day. And then even the other night, I worked until 5, and the school day ends at 2:30, and most folks are off campus, but a lot of us are not, right? We have to work later, and so I was in my office till 5, drove home, made dinner, and hopped right back on my laptop, and was on my laptop until about 9 o'clock, when we lost power, which meant we lost Wi-Fi. So I was like, maybe that's a sign that I'm not unplugging enough. And so we used the opportunity to have some flashlight games at home with our kids, which was great. And we should have been doing that before that. I think the key is that, we all have to be on screens more right now in order to connect with other people, in order to get our work done. Just even exchanging paper and touching the same surfaces doesn't meet guidelines. And so things have to be digital. I think what's important is that even if you're spending more time on screen, make sure you're also doing the things that your body physically needs. So make sure that you're getting enough exercise, make sure you're eating healthy food, make sure you're getting enough sleep. And don't be afraid to, I have a trusty pair of blue light glasses here next to my device that I use when I'm not on a video call, because there's a lot of glare. I'm at a standing desk. So there's lots of little things that we can do to try to make sure that we're giving our bodies what they need, even when we know we have too much screen time. And I also think it's perfectly okay to turn off some notifications between certain hours when you're at home, so that you're not getting those work emails coming through. and creating that space and setting up a culture at your school that allows for that space for you and for others is an important step that we can all take.
Yeah, I think teachers are already notorious for overworking and spending a ton of time at home on their curriculum and on prep, planning and all those things. And I think you could find that point where all the technology that we're using and the remote stuff that we're doing could really exacerbate that problem and kind of speed up what happens to a lot of teachers if they don't do that, is they'll burn out quickly. And I think this might, where we are right now could add to that. So I think that's great advice for administrators to be able to recognize that and say, look, we need to try some of these things and really evaluate it rather than just let it flow and not address the issue. I think there's even tools that I've used before that are like little tools you can put on your computer that says, hey, you've been on the screen for 45 minutes, take a break for 30 seconds and stretch and do something. And those are great too. I think that can be really helpful. One last thing regarding professional development, which is close to my heart, and I did a lot of work in professional development when I was with Hillsborough County Schools, and I think you're exactly right with meeting teachers where they are in those things. But I think one of the things that stood out, and it was really nice how it looped back to the very beginning of your talk, was, the PD ideas, those all tie back into adding those tools slowly. And it really flowed well with how important that is, that we don't just dump tons of tools in teachers' hands and say, okay, got to learn all these and do it. You really, it really hit that point well in letting teachers get acclimated to the tools that they have, letting them flex their muscles on the tools that they have, and before throwing things at them. The professional development process, though, for this, like you said, is really, has to be multi-pronged effort. When it comes to that, has all the things we're doing, I think we're talking about now, it really, though, has it had an effect on the time teachers have to dedicate to those things just in general? And is there any solutions for that, or is it just one of those things that we're all having to deal with?
I think the key is, yes, it has had an effect on the time, right? The teachers, all of us, administrators and teachers, no matter how long, like I'm 20 years in to being an education professional, and I'm looking up new research constantly about how to adjust my practice. And for some of the teachers that I serve here at my school, what I'm hearing them actually say, and it takes a great deal of humility for them to say this, so I admire them, is that they feel like a first-year teacher again, even though they're decades into their career, because they have to relearn how to design lessons that work in this way, how to teach and connect with students, which the relationships with, if you're a teacher, building a relationship with your students, that's the easy part, right? That's why you went into education, because you like being with kids. Now you can actually be with them in the same way that allows those relationships to form naturally. So I think they're feeling like first-year teachers, which means if I remember what my first year teaching was like, I was exhausted and I was working 24/7 just trying to keep up with a normal teaching pace. Prior to all of this hitting, I could walk down the hallway, and in the 30 seconds prior to teaching my class, I could come up with a lesson plan and then execute it pretty much, because I knew my curriculum so well. I'd been doing it for so long. I also was a pretty, experienced educator, so I knew which lesson types work and which ones don't. And I could pivot really quickly if something went wrong, because I've come up with a good kind of quiver of approaches that work well for me. Now we're having to come up with brand new approaches. We're trying them. Some of them are failing. Teachers are used to being really good at what they do, and they're not really good at it right now. And so they need time and space to test things out, try them, maybe have them not work, try them again. And it's a hit to the ego, right?
Yeah.
But it also means that they need just like we urge teachers to provide their students with some metacognitive time to reflect on what they've learned and how they've grown as a result of that learning. we need to build in metacognitive time for our teachers to reflect on which lessons have worked, why they worked, which ones haven't, why they haven't, and what maybe they need to feel more successful moving forward. And building in that time it's a challenge. It's probably the hardest part of being a leader in a school right now, is trying to figure out how to make sure the students are getting the time on learning that they deserve, but your teachers are getting the time on learning that they deserve in order to make the student learning high quality. So it's not easy. I think we all have to be creative. Some things that I've seen some schools do is hire like teaching assistants or paraprofessionals to do some supervision that teachers normally would do in terms of like lunches and recesses and stuff like that, so that teachers are tack on that prep time. I'm trying to think of some other creative thing. Having teachers teach chunks, like a block of time, maybe a whole morning, but then they get the whole afternoon off. So they get 2 solid hours of prepping where they can get a lot done, rather than spreading out their prep time into like 30-minute chunks where it's like you just start something and you have to go back to teaching. So scheduling creatively, I think, can help give teachers this time that they need, that we're talking about, David.
Yeah, that's great. And it takes, I don't necessarily try to overuse that term, it takes a village, but it takes really all types of people to do that. And that's where teachers, you have so many different talents at schools that, administrators can turn to and use those talents. And once you find those people, it's awesome to be able to let them do those things, like the scheduling part, which I know is really tough, and those kind of things can be great. Administrators find those people and utilize them and really make them, get the most out of the resources. So that's great. Thank you so much, Kerry. I'm gonna turn off if you can stop sharing your screen, I'll share mine here. If I can push my button here.
Also, while you're doing that, I just want to say, administrators, like, don't be afraid to walk the talk. Like, I covered a 6th grade band class the other day. I covered, a high school German class, and I don't speak a lick of German. So, like, don't be afraid to walk the talk. And when you see a teacher who really needs a break, step in and be like, I got your class, it's fine, right? And, if you're a school administrator, you've been a teacher and you've walked up through the ranks of working at a school, you can handle a class for 30 minutes so that a teacher gets what they need, so that then when they're back in the classroom, they're really able to give a high quality experience to the next students that they serve.
That's great advice. Great advice. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Thank you, Kerry. Let's see, you guys. Thank you, Kerry, and thank you for everyone who is able to join us live today and those who are listening to the recording. It is really important that we keep these conversations going. And I know that Kerry's organization, the work that she does with Connect Safely on her website as well with kerryhawk02.com, and Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence are ready to help do that. As part of this webinar series, we also want to make sure that you're aware of the exciting offer for registrants and attendees of the webinars. Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence is hosting their 21st annual conference, which would normally be in Orlando, but it's being held virtually this year. But there are 40 schools or districts that are represented by 40 different presenters, all of them sharing insights, a lot of like what you heard with Kerry today, best practices, offering an opportunity to network with like-minded professionals around the country. After we finish this series, we'll be doing a drawing for some free registrations to the virtual conference, and those of you who win will be notified via email, so please stay tuned for that. I also want to thank Megan Lipinzik, Allison Maxon, Christina Armstrong for their tireless support in getting all these set up. I also want to thank Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence and Dr. Judy Fields for bringing all of us together, for bringing Kerry in and helping us be able to connect with her. And finally, thank you so much for Kerry Gallagher for her time today, and all the work that she's doing to support her school and all the schools that she's able to work with, and through the things that she's talking about with Connect Safely and through all the things that we've discussed today. It really is beneficial to all those schools. If you want more information about Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence, you see the website here. Go to blueribbonschoolsofexcellence.com, or you can contact Judy at blueribbonschools.com if you'd like more information about the if you'd like more information about them. If you would like more information that we talked about in the beginning regarding backwards planning the technology for the modern classroom, or understanding the true costs of the modern classroom, please contact Megan or myself. Our emails are in the chat here. Hopefully we can drop them in the chat, but if not, you see them on the screen. Go to ScreenBeam.com to request a free trial and take a look at the resources that we have available for education. Thank you so much once again, Kerry. Appreciate your time, and thank you all. And we'll be signing off. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and the weekend's coming up quick, so hope you enjoy that as well. We'll be signing off now. Thank you once again.